So, another one of the biggest mistakes I see sometimes after a stroke is the way some may try to stretch an arm that's tight or just stretching in general without first preparing and warming up the muscles they're trying to stretch. And unfortunately, this is a habit that can actually make stretching more uncomfortable and sometimes even less effective. So, today I want to show you not just how to stretch your arm and hand after your stroke, but to really give you some strategies to get the most out of every stretch you do. Okay? So, why does stretching even matter? Well, a lot of times after a stroke, or some other type of neurological injury, it can become really easy for the muscles in your affected arm to start to shorten, especially if your arm is kept in pretty much the same position for hours and hours at a time throughout the day, right? Our arms, when healthy before the stroke, they moved constantly throughout the day in both big and small ways. We reach, we lift, we push, we pull, we carry, we pick things up and put them down. We use our upper body a lot. So then, let's say a stroke happens, and now one of your arms is either extremely weak or not able to move at all. That's a huge shift that's happened now. You've gone from almost constant motion and activity in that limb to complete or near immobility, right? So now this is where the importance of daily stretching and other types of active assisted exercises come in, because your arm is not able to move as it once did, at least not for now. You now have to take on that responsibility of actively stretching and mobilizing and exercising your arm as much as possible. Because when this doesn't happen, this is when we start to have some problems, with tightness, of the muscles from, the muscles tissue shortening from being stuck or getting used to being in the same position all the time. So, like if your arm is always positioned at your side and rarely gets moved, and definitely if you're hanging out in a sling most of the day, which again is a huge no no. So, hopefully, none of you are doing that at this point. But if for some reason you are, or you know someone who is, please check out the video I did recently about arm slings. There are very few and very specific instances where an arm sling can play a role, but it's definitely not supposed to be an all the time kind of thing. Okay. All right. So now here you are. You are wanting to stretch your arm and hand. The first thing you're going to want to do is warm up those muscles before you do anything else, because your muscles are going to respond and move so much better when they're warm. And no matter who I'm working with, and regardless of what their, like specific injury or condition is, if we're planning to do any kind of stretching or active arm strengthening, I almost never jump straight into stretching or strengthening without some form of warm up first. And I teach all of my patients and families to adopt the same practice whenever possible. Okay. So, what are some of your warm up options? Some people really like to warm up on like an arm bike for a few minutes before stretching. And we'll even use one of those like grip gloves to help that weaker hand to secure it on the pedal if necessary. Some respond really well to gentle weight bearing, or you can do things like table slides, right? Some people also really seem to swear by taking like a warm shower or just running their hand under warm water if they're going to focus more on just hand stretching, right? Or you can use a warm, moist towel or even a heating pad sometimes, but please just always be careful. If you use any kind of heat source on an area of your body that has impaired sensation, because our skin can damage really easily. But honestly, I prefer the methods that get your blood flowing and the limb in question that you're going to stretch actively and gently moving in some way, like with an arm bike or doing table slides. It's really no different from an athlete warming up before a workout or a practice or a game. So even for you, you just have to remember to take that time to do that warm up lap first. Don't just try to, jump in the game without warming up, right? Okay, so now that your arm is all warmed up and ready to go, the next thing you're gonna need to consider is the order and positioning, because both matter. So when I say order, I'm talking about the importance of working from the top down. This means you're gonna start with the shoulder blade first, behind here, and then move on to the other specific shoulder stretches, then move on down to the elbow, then the forearm, and then the wrist, and then the hands and fingers will be last. This is the same kind of natural progression in the arm that arm recovery typically happens in. So it's good to kind of follow that natural flow of the arm, because remember, it's all connected. Next is the position you're going to be in for each stretch. And are you going to be stretching sitting? Are you going to be stretching laying in the bed or on a therapy mat? Are you going to stretch with your arm like supported on a table, or some combination of all of those things? Here's how you decide. If you're able to lift your affected arm to at least shoulder height or above safely and without using any kind of funky movement patterns, then you have the option to stretch your shoulder either sitting upright or laying down. It will be up to your preference, what's most comfortable for you physically, which position seems to give you the best stretch, right? Now, if you are not able to lift your arm or shoulder, your arm to shoulder height or higher without, moving in these weird patterns, then I want you to do your shoulder stretches laying down, either in bed or on some other firm surface, or with your arm on a table surface, and use the towel slide method. Why do I say this? Because when your shoulder is weak to the point that you're not yet able to move the weight of your own arm, your shoulder joint is going to be less stable because of that muscle weakness. But when you lay down on a supported surface, like on your bed or on a therapy mat, or have your arm and elbow position on a table, your shoulder is going to be much better supported, okay? Now, after the shoulder stretches, it does get a little more straightforward, because now you just have, the elbow, which does get stretched some while you're doing your shoulder stretches. You've got your forearm, which is just palm up and down, the wrist and the hand, right? So for the elbow, I always recommend being seated, or you could be laying down if someone is stretching your elbow for you. But if you're stretching yourself, you want support under that elbow while you stretch and attempt to extend and straighten the arm. The focus with the elbow is extending and straightening, so that you're counteracting all that flex pulled in positioning that typically happens, throughout the day and while you're sleeping. So for the forearm, you're just going to gently rotate your palm down and apply a gentle turn in that same direction to deepen the stretch to your tolerance. And then you're just going to turn your palm back up and apply a slight turn in that other direction to deepen the stretch if you can. Okay. For the wrist and fingers, I typically actually like to stretch them together. So your forearm can be positioned or supported either like on your lap with a soft support, or if your hand is really tight, you can sometimes get that hand to open a little bit easier if you hang your hand over the edge of the table with like a towel or something else soft underneath your arm and wrist to protect your skin. But then from here, when you bring your wrist down into that flex position, you're going to try to bring your fingers too into a straightened position, or as straight as your hand will allow, right? And then when you bring your wrist back up, or that wrist, we call it extension, you can just either allow the fingers to curl in naturally, or you can apply gentle pressure into the stretch. But focus mostly on that stretch at the wrist, because what we're trying to preserve here is that natural tenodesis, which is just the way your thumb naturally comes in when your wrist comes up and back. Because for some people after neurological injury, they might get some wrist movement back, but no finger movement. But if they've preserved this tenodesis pattern, that can actually be really functional in terms of being able to pick up things and just using that hand in a lot of functional ways. So it's just really important not to overstretch the fingers into this pulled back extension, up and back, because it can lessen your hand's ability to maintain that natural tenodesis pattern. Okay. And for all of these stretches, you're going to want to try to hold each stretch for at least 20 to 30 seconds or more, depending on your tolerance and how tight those muscles actually are. And once you've gone through all these stretches for your arm, please don't undo it all by failing to position your arm properly throughout the rest of the day. And if you're dealing with a lot of like tone and spasticity, be sure to put on like whatever splint you're using, whether it's a resting hand splint or an anti-spasticity splint or just even a pillow splint. Get them back on as soon as you're done stretching to try to prevent and maintain those now lengthened muscle tissues, right? And I know I say this a lot too, but if you have very little or no movement in your arm yet, anytime you're stretching yourself, or even if someone else is stretching your arm for you, make sure that you're doing what I call intentional stretching, which means while the stretches and the movements are happening, you are thinking and visualizing in your mind as if you are actually making that movement happen, whether you actually are or not. Because it's been shown, research has shown that your brain will light up in those same exact pathways and areas, whether you think about a movement or if you actually do the movement itself. So take advantage of your daily stretch routine as just another opportunity, for your brain to reestablish those connections between the brain, the nerves, and then the muscles, right? I just want you all to remember that there's really no one size fits all here. That's probably honestly one of my biggest pet peeves with a lot of the resources out there for like range of motion after a stroke. I mean, even some of the handouts that us therapists have access to at work and sometimes, give to our patients and their families really need to be tweaked and customized for each person, because that standard of just interlacing your fingers and stretching that way just doesn't cut it for most people. And definitely if you have a weak shoulder, that's just not the way to go. So it's really important that you know your body and change positions as you need to during your stretch routine so that you can optimize each stretch based on your current level of function in your arm. It's not about doing what like Susie and Bob are doing over there. You have to do what works and makes sense for where you are in your recovery, right? You have to run your own race, okay? If you have any questions at all about anything we talked about today, or if you're open to sharing what's been working for you in your stretch routine at home, please leave me a comment. Let me know, okay? As always, guys, I truly hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next time. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe for more DIY videos to help you along the way in your stroke recovery. Struggling at home? Have a question? Leave me a comment. I'm here to help.